Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission for Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. I'd like to open the meeting at 7:30. May we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Carpenter?
Here.
Mr. Fitzer?
Here.
Mr. Cusero?
Here.
Mr. Nushai?
Here.
Ms. Redmond?
Here.
Mr. Scott? Mr. Solomon?
Here.
And Mr. Tinlin. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tinlin and Mr. Scott have excused themselves a couple days ago. They said they would both be out of town, so I was aware that they weren't coming. But we do have a quorum. So does anybody have any problems with tonight's agenda, or should I just approve it as is? No problems. I will then approve it as it stands, and we'll go on to agenda item number 5, which is approval of the regular meeting minutes from November 12th, 2024.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of November 12th, 2024.
Support.
Motion support. Any changes, corrections? Seeing none, may I have roll call, please?
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Cusero?
Yes.
Mr. Nushai?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Solomon?
Yes.
And Mr. Carpenter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is public discussion. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak at this time?
Hello, Brent Vasicek, 310 Charlevoix Street. I sent you an email, and I'm sure you all got it. I think yours came back to me, Mr. Fitzer. It was just about the short-term rental discussion you're going to have and just making sure it's fair and equitable among long-term and short-term rentals in the city. I'm just here if you have any questions. Nothing really else to say.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I'll close public discussion, and we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is consideration of canceling the December 24th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. Oh, so looking forward to coming here the day before Christmas. Can we just go A, or do we have to call a roll on it?
We should just do a typical motion roll call. We don't have anyone looking to have their site plan reviewed on Christmas Eve, so
Good.
just wanted to put it on the agenda to have that removed officially.
Okay.
Should I motion for
Sure.
it? Yeah, I move to cancel the meeting on December 24th, 2024.
Support.
Motion support, roll call, please.
Mr. Cusero?
Yes.
Mr. Nushai?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Solomon?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
And Mr. Fitzer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas. Agenda item number 8 is a short-term rental ordinance discussion. So we're not voting or anything tonight, we're just going to further discuss this.
Sorry, I got closed out my laptop. So during the November 12th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting, the commission voted to recommend the city council approve ordinance language related to short-term rentals. This was presented to the city council during their November 19th city council meeting. And they did have a few comments and items that wanted to kick back to the Planning Commission for further discussion on to maybe refine a few things. I don't know if anyone had the chance to watch the few minutes from that meeting where this was discussed. I did link it in the packet. I hope that linked work. I know we've had issues in the past with that link. And again, my understanding of what they were looking for is, so they wanted to recognize that letter that was received from the Greater Metropolitan Association of Realtors regarding certain circumstances where short-term rentals need to be permitted in residential districts. They did reference the parking and fencing requirements. There were some comments related to interior inspections, and then there was a couple general comments just to find a more balanced tool to govern short-term rentals. And so because it is back in front of you, I don't know if there was a certain topic that anyone wanted to chat about first, or if we just wanted to kind of start as a whole and run through anything specific.
I don't.
Oh, you timed yourself out, man.
I did. All right, time to go.
Okay, you're done.
Still learning the ins and outs with this thing. Sorry about that.
And can you clarify, are we aiming to update a motion to pass something along to city council at this meeting, at a later date?
At this meeting, I think it'd be best to discuss a few things. I don't think we're going to need a motion, but to kind of have a few bullet points that we can come back to, draft some language, and then present that back to you, probably the first meeting in January. I think that would make sense.
So can you define for us, like, what is, because I thought a lot of the ordinance wasn't us. I thought a lot of the ordinance, like, we were simply supposed to do the zoning part of it. And some of it, when I was watching that meeting, I'm like, did we do that? I don't recall. Because I remember years back when this first started, talking to the attorney about, specific items on the ordinance. And I thought we were only doing the zoning portion of it.
So the zoning ordinance regulations for short-term rentals. And so it was defined to have them as permitted uses in the B3, BRD2, and the I1 districts. And then there was some supplemental language regarding short-term rentals, which stated, that's where it discussed the parking and the fencing requirements.
See, I don't remember talking about fencing, but it maybe,
We must have,
Yeah, it's-
Rental property shall have a fence.
okay.
yeah, we must have previous, on the November 12th meeting, you made the motion, it was supported by Scott. It was resolved, I move to approve and recommend the zoning ordinance amended as presented to include, and we included yearly interior inspections and an annual cap of no more than 10. So that's the only change we made. Excuse me. I watched the council meeting where they turned it down. Basically, they don't like what we sent them. They want us to tweak it, clean it up a little bit, change it around a little bit, and send it back to them for their approval. Mr. Shepherd and I talked about it, and I think it's confusing to me because he was saying that part of the problem is, let's say I own a house in Clawson, and I said I'm going to move, so I sell my house. So now you bought my house, and I can't quite move into my new house, so I'm going to stay there, and while I stay there, I'm going to pay you rent for that. So I'm renting, and they're comparing that to a short-term rental. I don't see the similarities in that at all.
That's done that looks really.
Yeah, well, it's occupancy, right? It's post occupancy after a house closes. It's done very often. And I could see the nuance of that being somebody, I don't know who's gonna
Yeah,
do
you're-
anything about it necessarily, but I do think it's worth maybe amending our ordinance to make sure.
Somewhere we have to get the words in there that's straight, that if you're renting the house to me only temporarily until I can move out, that is different than a.
Yeah.
I think it's because the
short-term
way that and I think it's a pretty common theme between cities is how you define a short-term rental is that it's for a period for less than 30 days. And so if they're renting it for 2 weeks, it's technically considered a short-term rental where there's not an intent to re-rent it as a short-term rental, but to allow the previous occupant to stay longer, short-term. And so my take is it's kind of a play on words in how you use the property, but the way it's defined, we probably should have language in there that references that.
I don't see somebody purchasing a house and not being able to get the people out on time, coming in and applying for a short-term rental on that piece of property. I don't think they would do that.
I agree. I did reach out to GMAR and the representative that sent the email and got some clarifying language that he said Berkeley and Rochester use. I did send it to Nick and Joe. I think it was a little my fault late for them to send it off to you guys, but I know Nick said he was gonna bring some copies of that potential language.
I just printed off the email exchange that you shared, and so
Okay.
I will hand this out to everyone, and we'll include a version of it in the minutes, so it's part of the public record.
Okay.
Okay.
And it's just a simple, at the end of the day, it's a simple, extra bullet point that we can add to the ordinance that doesn't drastically change things, but allows for, estate sales or even pet sitting, like, I think was it Rochester, house sitting, pet sitting, those kinds of, I don't see anyone really coming after someone, and I don't know if our code enforcement officer actually has the bandwidth to find out if someone's pet sitting but we should probably make sure it's tight, right? And done right, so.
Yeah, it has to be worded correctly. Whether it's enforced or not is another matter, I think.
Yeah, what I've learned is that sometimes ordinances are overly restrictive or the complete opposite. And so I think if we can have it defined similarly to like it is in that sheet of paper that we handed out, I think that could be appropriate.
Yeah, the Rochester one is pretty nice, it's clean.
Yeah, it gives kind of every example unless somebody else gives us an email that we never thought of. And the fence thing, I think that's probably something maybe we discussed at the very beginning of things before. I don't see the reason to have fences in I-1 and, I think that probably was something we overlooked towards the end because we've been working on this for 2 years now?
Yeah, it's in the article. It's number 3, a short-term rental property shall have a fenced rear yard.
Yeah.
I fail to see the point of that also. Can we scratch that out, Joe?
Does everybody feel like the Rochester one kind of covers what
Yep,
we're looking to cover in
agree.
terms of?
I think we're looking at a lot of different items like noise levels, how many people are going to be there, and
That's covered in the channel. That's,
how many violations they can have before their license is revoked by the city manager. Inspections seem to be a thing, too.
That's true, yeah, we should.
Our
talk about
Mr.
that.
Public here tonight, in his email, I understand his point. He's saying if we force short-term rentals to be inspected internally, his attitude is we should have a level playing field and every rental in town should be inspected internally. I tend to disagree with that theory because to me, a short-term rental is a business more so than just renting your house out for a year or two.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I see a separation, but I guess legally it would kind of sound the same.
Well, but if you're transient in use, like, when you're in a home for a longer period of time, you know the escape routes, you know if there's working smoke detectors, someone that's transient and coming in and out, I feel like there's not as many safeguards up, and I don't know, you're not an attorney, Nick, but it would seem like if we're licensing for certain things, then we might end up with a liability if we don't have the proper protections in place in terms of making sure, is there a liability to a city giving out licenses and the smoke detectors don't work, or without any type
Again,
of?
certainly not an attorney, but my take on it is that if in our ordinance we said that we do interior inspections and then didn't, and then there was a violation, it would indicate that we have the intent to
Dropped
do
the
it.
ball.
But if we
Okay.
don't have it in the ordinance, we're not doing the interior inspections, then I believe we would not take that liability on. But
Right.
again,
Okay, well, that was one of my questions, and the use is more of a hotel use, and I those are regularly inspected, right? I don't know how often, we don't have a ton of hotels, do we even?
that's a health department inspection.
Is it? And they also do fire inspections every year, right?
that's correct.
Typically. So I don't think that, I get why Glenn doesn't, because we don't have the administrative backing to do these full intense inspections, and I don't want to be over intrusive either, but I don't know the balance, I guess.
Yeah, I've got a copy of Clausen's short-term rental application. I picked it up in the lobby a while back. You fill out this form. The rental fee per building is $80. Property owner is responsible for payment of all fees. The bottom line here, it says the building inspector will do the required inspections, period. That's it. That's as far as it goes. And as far as I'm aware of now, the building inspector might drive by the building and look at the outside and see that it's there. And
They'll do an exterior inspection, so they'll make sure that if there's, the railings are done properly, simple things like the address is posted on the home, just to make sure the home is structurally safe and sound, there's not broken windows. They'll check to make sure there's not any other ordinance violations. So things like that you can see from the exterior of the property.
When the city does regular occupancy type inspections, more commercial, they go and they check the smoke detector, or if someone even pulls a permit for something, you guys do code inspections, right? If it's up to code, like fire, smoke alarms, fire extinguisher kind of things.
So when, say someone's occupying a new commercial space before they open, they'll get their certificate of occupancy. Our fire marshal will go out and do inspection to check those things that you were just touching on, make sure they have fire extinguisher, fire route signs, those type of items. And then our building official will go and make sure everything's up to building code, ADA compliance, those type of things.
So would it make sense to do that initially? And then is there a way to have them sign an affidavit of like, I've checked my smoke alarms and changed the batteries, or like, because I get why we don't want admin coming in and checking smoke alarms every year and, expired fire extinguishers. But like, is there a way we can have them sign some type of affidavit when they go to reapply for the license, or is
that they're responsible for that?
that they've done those things and that they're, saying that they've been done? Is that weird to
I mean, I think
propose?
it could be, but I think the other important thing to note is when there's a short-term rental, a majority of the time it's more than likely through Airbnb or VRBO, and they do have a lot of strict requirements that they have their property owners do and meet in order to be open and occupied, because it is their liability as well. There is a lot of responsibility that falls on that property owner, though. So if someone is operating a short-term rental, I mean, they'll have to get a C of O, and so we'll have to do those type of inspections anyway.
So they do have to, right, because of where it's at. It
Correct.
needs to
It's just
stay
that recurring component that I think we're a little bit hung up on at this stage and at city council.
Okay.
Right, council doesn't want yearly inspections? Am I gathering that right, or?
So when they were discussing it, they didn't make a motion on any specific items, so we're just kind of picking out the details of what each of them mentioned. And so there was a few comments, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you all watch the meeting, is that there's some hesitation to do routine interior inspections.
Why? Like, they have no faith on you guys?
I don't think that's the case, but I'm not going to speak on behalf of them because I don't know what's going on for their rationale. I think they're worried about the imbalance between regular rentals and short-term rentals, and then, what happens after that if we allow it.
I didn't hear them say anything about regular versus short-term, but we don't do yearly at a regular interior. We don't even do a regular interior at all on,
No.
Yeah.
But I think part of the rationale is if we do it for short-term rentals, then the next step would be doing interior for our regular rentals, which we have
Which I would
320
I
to
would
300.
disagree with that, but I think we'd have to word it somehow that, to me, there's a drastic difference between renting out a house and a short-term rental. The time period that you're using it for, I see them as two separate entities, and I don't think that if we inspect short-term rentals, which I'm in favor of inspecting the short-term, I don't think we should even deal with the long-term rentals, let them take care of themselves. And I don't think that's playing an unlevel field, as far as I'm concerned, it's not. If we can word it that way, so that somebody renting a house for a year or so is not stuck in the trap with this.
Yeah, and that's for the I guess, currently 6 of you to decide on. I think what no one wants to do is to get in the stage of, all right, we made this tweak, the short-term rental ordinance goes to council, it comes back. And so if that is dead set on what the planning commission wants,
Council should be made clear that this is more business rather than a home. When you rent a home for long term, it's still a home to somebody. But this is treated as a hotel, as a business. I think that's the caveat that they're missing.
Right, if
Well, I
you-
agree with you. This is-
We've
it should be
defined,
treated
yeah.
as a-
We've defined what a short-term rental is, and we put restrictions on where they can be located.
Right,
I mean,
they're-
that in itself is separating the two
They're
from
different
short
than-
and long-term in itself.
Yeah, they're different than a long-term rental. They're
Right.
definitely two different things.
Yeah, somebody's home.
One thing to note is that that wasn't actually part of the ordinance language we were putting in the zoning ordinance. It was a recommendation that we made to council
Oh.
for the general ordinance. So there's not really language for us to work out here as far as that's concerned. It was a recommendation to council to consider instituting inspections as part of the ordinance for short-term rentals. Because that's something, we can't really do that under zoning, so, I guess it's a suggestion they aren't interested in taking, I guess.
Have you ever heard of some type of yearly sign-off, Joe, on an applicant that would, state that they've checked those items, that we could do some type of, I get that they could lie, but at least when we're worried about the city's obligation or the city's liability, we could always say, this guy, he said he checked the smoke detectors when he reapplied in January,
Yeah, I mean, they're reapplying every year, renewing every year, so it's just a box on the application that you can have them say, I'm meeting all the standards and I'm up to date with this and that, and yeah, of course, they can decline to tell the truth, but, most people won't, and then you've at least got some testimony from them that they've been doing it.
And it would seem to offset a little bit of that liability, I guess, that what is mostly my concern is the liability of it all. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels about something like that as they're reapplying.
I mean, when it comes to health and safety, I don't understand why they would allow the honor system to apply.
Yeah.
In this case, and we don't allow the honor system to apply in any other aspect when it comes to health and safety. So why should it in this circumstance?
so, and Joe mentioned an important item is that the amendments that need to be made to the short-term rentals, the inclusion of something to have these provisions about house sitting, the real estate transactions, and then the fencing and parking are the ordinance amendment items that the commission should be modifying. And then when that goes back to the city council, if the planning commission wants to continue including the recommendation to modify the actual ordinance, not the zoning, to include provisions for interior inspections, that can still be a recommendation that you provide, and then they can act on that. how they
Yeah,
see
we're
fit.
just, I think.
Can I
we're
back
trying to-
this whole thing up? And I apologize, but I brought this up like during the joint meeting. Why are we talking about this besides the zoning and where they should be permitted? And this is not to blame anybody in this room or the city council, but it just feels that they're asking us for recommendations, but they're pushing them back, saying, we don't like your recommendation. That's fine. They don't need to accept all recommendations. What we gave them, which I'm wondering if we can separate in some capacity, is the areas that we feel they can be zoned in, which is the responsibility of this board. So I'm a little confused why we continue to have this discussion. It keeps getting volleyed back and forth. Nothing's getting completed, but it does feel like the responsibility of city council to take the recommendation or not. And then they can amend the ordinance as they please, because that's their responsibility and their duties.
They need something on books, and right now it's a little bit too loose, so they want us to fine tune it, and it's coming our way. Ferndale has approximately 70 short-term rentals in Ferndale right now. Waterford has 7 of them,
Yeah.
3 approved. And
I think that-
have you seen the television ads lately?
Right, I think we agree on, because I think we had a cap as well. So
Yeah,
we
we do
talked
have a
about
cap.
zoning, where
Yeah.
we feel they are appropriate within Clausen. And I think they also agreed with a cap, which I don't know that we have a cap today in the current ordinance. right? So that
Not
was one of the
currently, no.
recommendations.
So-
But I'm just,
Sorry.
I apologize. I just get a little hung up on what is the ask for us and why is it being sent back to this board instead of just adopting?
Because
few
there
items we
were
agree
still
on.
some provisions in the ordinance amendment for the zoning ordinance that they wanted to see changed. So I think what Joe and I should probably do is update the ordinance to reflect the items that we discussed tonight, and then have a separate document to maybe define the recommendations a little more clearly for your awareness and for city councils. Just that way it's more than just a couple bullet points. And we can bring that back to you on January 14th. And then at that point, can make a decision from there.
And again, I'm happy to have the discussions. I just don't know. It's ultimately not the final decision, right? Of this board, this planning commission, I'm sorry. So,
Well, and I think my intention was anyway is to give them an alternative. What I was kind of throwing out there, like, I guess I would ask that maybe you give them the rationale as well, and I don't recall if you did or not, so if you did, I get it. But the rationale or the importance of why we thought that that was a good recommendation. So my only thing that I was trying to do here is maybe give an alternative. If they felt like that was too intrusive, maybe we can do it a different way. But I respect that. We didn't address parking, though.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah.
and by the way, I do agree that, if a yearly inspection internally feels too much, that is a good option, right? So when you first apply for the permit and if we want an internal inspection at that point, maybe that's a possibility, but then how do you then have them agree that they're gonna maintain smoke alarms, things like that?
Right, but it might also just be a mental check, like, oh, I should probably go check those too, right? I don't know.
But I think that puts more of the balance, because if there's already a cap, I mean, how many more per year are we really gonna have? The city should be able to do an internal inspection for the one or two new ones we get potentially here and there, rather than having to do a full inspection of the 10 on the books every year.
Right now, we have 8. That's the last list you gave us.
There's 11.
There's 11.
There's been additional applications that
And we
have come
could put a
in.
cap on 10, but we have 11?
The
cap is not
ordinance
that.
isn't set
Yeah.
yet.
There's no-
Okay.
So
That's
the next
my-
2 weeks, all 5,000 homes could be short-term rentals.
That's my concern, that's my worry.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Is this one, part of the reason that I was asking too, of like, if we have an agreement on the zoning and we have agreement on the cap, could we move on those items while we continue to just discuss and go back and forth? It just takes a long time.
Right.
For the other open items that we're still kind of debating on.
So again, I think the best course of action would be to have the ordinance amended, bring it back to you next meeting, and Joe and I can work on a document that outlines the recommendations that we think you're trying to get, add some more background to that. And then if there's anything that you guys want to pick apart on that document, we can make those modifications during that meeting. And then ideally approve it then and send it to council with the separate document with the recommendations.
Yeah, and if we're still gonna have that, and you guys are still gonna draft that, I'm happy to have the discussion tonight. For me, it was more clarification on what's the expectation of the planning commission, right, from city council. So,
Yeah, I
please
find-
continue the discussion. I apologize for derailing us. I just really wanted that clarity. I never really got it from the past few times I've asked.
I find it bothersome to see so many around us in other cities, and like television ads. Have you guys seen the television ads? They show a house and say, you want to do an Airbnb? Contact us. Airbnb will come in and we'll work with you. And so I've seen two different companies televising it. So there's a big market for it, and it kind of makes sense. If I went out and bought a house and I rented it out for a year, I'm going to make X amount of dollars. If I bought that house and I use it as a short-term rental, I'm going to make a lot more money. So there's a market that people that have the money to go out and buy a house and convert it to this type of a business. That's why I think it's entirely separate than a long-term. The short-term and long-term are two extremely different things. I'm not sure if council got that. So if
We can
you guys-
provide some more rationale when we bring it back to you.
Yeah, I think if you give us a list of what we can and can't say, or what we should or shouldn't say, and then we'll tweak it from there, I guess.
Okay.
And I know we want to talk about parking, but and I apologize, I'm trying to just shift between the recommendations, because I think I abstained last time because I was gone during the discussion where we came up with recommendation items. And then flipping to the actual current ordinance, is there a density? Did we ever address density as well as cap, or just cap
Density,
in terms of,
When it was moved out of the residential districts, that was removed.
there was no longer that concern?
Didn't really have a reason either.
Okay.
yeah.
What about, since, we're going to have, a number of legacy short-term rentals that are allowed in R1 districts or R2 districts, I mean, should we have some language that specifies density in that regard? Since there are, the 11 that are,
They're just non-conforming, though. We can't apply an ordinance
Yeah.
necessarily, right?
Right. Because they're already existing currently.
So would that be, in regards to the inspections, would they be required? If in the event an inspection is required,
They would have to apply and do that.
'Cause that's a year-
Because
it's 'cause it's a
they'd still be
yearly-
getting their yearly certificate.
It would also be a general ordinance which can be applied retroactively to a use, whereas zoning can't be applied retroactively, so.
okay.
And we have this already as like, you can't transfer, right? That's already in the main language. Okay. So in terms of parking, again, I think that's something that we kind of formulated very beginning, maybe 2 years ago, and things have changed. Did you guys have any ideas, Joe, on like what type of parking we should require? Like a certain number of spots per room, or like almost how we have, I don't know how hotels regulate parking. But is there some type of formula we should look at for that?
Well, so there's two components to the parking clause in here. One is that parking has to be accommodated on site, which I don't think we want to get rid of that.
Right.
So it's more about the details, how much are we requiring? Because every other use in our ordinance has some sort of requirement that applies to it, so this one should too. Right now, it's 1 per 3 occupants at maximum rated occupancy. And hotels, I can give you the hotel standard real quick here. Let's see. Just looking for it. One for each guest bedroom, and then if they have other accessory uses, that's in addition. But it's basically one per guest room is the current standard.
Okay.
Our ordinance says all parking shall be accommodated on-site within a garage and/or a paved driveway. The owner of the unit shall demonstrate that the site can accommodate 1 vehicle per 3 occupants at maximum occupancy.
Right.
1 vehicle for 3 people. And we're not limiting the amount of people that can be in the building, right?
No, that's done under the other ordinance.
We haven't done that, which I think is another good thing to look at. Some cities.
But I think there's certain housing regulations that regulate how many people to a room,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. The other ordinance, the general ordinance, the licensing ordinance takes care of that. We're not doing that in under zoning, but, so every one of these units will have an established maximum occupancy. So you can peg your parking requirement to that maximum occupancy. And the 1 per 3, I think where we were going with that is, well, if you have, let's say you have the grandparents and a family of 4, that's like, the daughter and her family, and they're coming together at this unit, well, 1 per 3 is going to cover that, right? And, you know, we require that any house have 2 spaces. So, I mean, most of these houses aren't huge. They're probably not going to have massive occupancy. So, I mean, I'm thinking a lot of these houses probably are going to have 2 spaces on the driveway and 1 in the garage or something. I mean, it seems like, unless you just want to do a 2 space per rental type standard or 3 spaces per rental type standard. I mean,
It's another thing. We can write it up there, we can put it in there, but it has to be enforced at the same time. And the Airbnb on 14 Mile that nobody wants to talk about, that's been there for a long time. I've driven by it a few times, and their driveway's full, and they're parking on the front lawn there, right on 14 Mile. They park on the grass. City ordinance, you don't park on your lawn. And I don't see anything being done about it, but they're not a licensed Airbnb at the same time either.
They're still not
As
licensed?
far as I know, they're not.
They are.
They are?
Yeah.
They're not on my list.
Well, you
of-
should call and report they're parking on the grass then.
Yeah, and again, I've driven by there. It's my route to work, but obviously it's either 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning.
They're on the weekends.
No, and
You're not here.
right. So that is something that would need to be enforced by the police department. And so they're driving by, they notice it, they can issue a ticket there, or if anyone sees it, if I see it on a Saturday, if I'm in town, I would let them know, and they're there to handle that.
Are they licensed now?
Yes.
Because I think I asked at the meeting that we had before, and they weren't. I don't think they were even on their radar that they were. That place was built as a short-term rental, I
It's
believe.
been, I don't know the exact date where they applied, but it's been within the last month, give or take.
Okay, so they've been at it for quite some time. So it's good.
Yeah, they sold that a couple, I think it
Yeah.
was 2 years now, right?
Yeah, that house
Something
is
like that. Yeah,
burned down and rebuilt. Yeah.
they paid a lot for that one. Yeah, so, Joe, in terms of let's see, we got B2, B3, I1. Do we need to have any type of language in there that and should it be outside of what is already required? Like, what if a use is like an artisan type use? I guess I don't know, and should we have that in addition to what is required if it's a multifunctional property, right? If they've got an Airbnb up top, but a shop at the bottom, is that something that we need to have some specific language in our ordinance about this is addition to and outside of what may already be required? Or do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, chances are if someone is renting out a portion of a mostly commercial property, they're probably not going to be trying to do it when they've got customers coming to the building. Yeah, it's the standard that we've got in there makes a lot of sense if it's houses. As far as putting it into commercial areas, I mean, you definitely want to make sure that you're not piling something else onto the site that is going to cause problems with the other things that are happening on the site. And, you know, our commercial buildings tend to have more square footage than our residential buildings per floor. So you might have a significantly higher occupancy on those properties. You know, if it's a 1,200 square foot house, there's a pretty hard limit on the number of people you can get in there.
Right.
If you have a 3,000 square foot commercial building with an upper floor and you're renting out the upper floor, well, there'll be a lot of people.
Right, yeah, and I mean, I think of like South Haven, where I've stayed in a little,
Yeah.
condo upstairs of the shop, right? They don't
Yeah.
give me any parking there, but.
Sure.
But if we're gonna require it, it seems like it probably should be either in addition to or something that we automatically kind of build into our B2, B3, I1. I don't know what the best way to approach that.
Yeah, I think in addition to makes the most sense.
Okay.
Because you're just not going to have that many of these, so doing something district-wide, I don't know that,
It would be unfair,
yeah,
yeah.
it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, but,
Yeah, I don't understand why we even specify parking per occupant or vice versa, why not just define what parking is? I.e., you know, it's gotta be on concrete, on the property, not on the grass. And, because, you know, you can get a van full of a family, whatever,
Sure.
5 or 6 people in a van, and there's only one spot for parking, adequate beds or bedrooms, and now you're out of compliance. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
why put that restriction on? And we also have our own, you know, requirement, or, you know, ordinances for parking in the streets that kind of cover that. I don't know, I mean.
Well, that's what I was kind of thinking too in my head, maybe playing off, well, this was written before we
Yeah.
kind of zoned in on zoning. But Joe, like when a B1, or sorry, B2, B3, I1 come in front of us for a site plan and we're looking at parking, that's something we would know in the site plan because we'd have to know if there's, you know, a bathroom and a kitchen and, right? Like, is that something we can address at that time? Or?
Yeah, I mean, if they're modifying the site to accommodate a use a new use, then yeah, we would be looking at that. So we would be able to assess the parking situation on the site, I would think.
So you don't want to give any
I-
specific numbers on
I
parking?
don't feel there's a need. I just, you know, if maybe require a parking spot, you know, at least one.
Well, I mean, I guess we're not talking about houses, but houses are definitely gonna have 2 spaces, cause
Right.
they all are required to have 2. It's a matter of these other properties.
But in some might not have any parking at all, right? There's some in, well, I guess it's more so city center though, but like,
Right.
Yeah.
but then where do they go, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just, you know, you're putting a restriction on, you know, based on parking, you're putting a restriction on how many occupants can be in there.
Right.
And it's, you know, that's what a SUV, who knows if it's an SUV or a car or a van? I mean, if the house or the structure has the capacity to safely, you know, host those guests, why limit it by the amount of parking spaces? I mean, there's other ways to get to a rental, bike, motorcycle, I don't know. Why not just define the actual, what constitutes a parking spot, so they're not driving on the lawn, or, you know, sidewalk, or the neighbors, or, you know, I'm not sure, but, you know, and then let the ordinance of not parking in the street also cover requirements.
That was one of the complaints we got from residents.
Red Ruth?
Is it Red, yeah, Red Ruth, over there behind Nick's Kitchen?
Mm-hmm.
Seems like the residents were complaining that there was a party there and a lot of cars, and they were taking up a lot of parking spaces. So,
But in the street?
yeah, in that case, they were.
Yeah, and then, you know, you can park in the street, you know, from the hours allowed, right? And then
Right.
after that becomes a code enforcement, or a, you know, police enforcement issue.
Police action.
Regardless, it's a police enforcement issue.
Well, except for we require parking standards for everything, because if we don't hold that specific site accountable for that, then it becomes a burden on the community, right? Like, you know, any site plan we look at, do they meet the parking requirements? Because if not, then we're gonna have lots of people in here saying, I've got nowhere to park, this is your problem, or the residents that take on that parking issue saying, there's no parking at this site, and they're all using, you know,
Yeah.
spots that they shouldn't, you know? So I feel like we should probably have some type of parking.
I don't see, I mean, any other resident can have a party and also take up parking spots and, you know, be a burden on the rest of the community, but it's, you know, you can park in the street, and then after the allowable hours, 2:00, it's an enforcement issue. I don't know.
But so someone comes to Airbnb and they don't necessarily know I mean,
Then they pay
you're
the
asking
ticket.
them to take on that burden
I mean,
and not the actual owner of the Airbnb. It's taking,
I mean, that's how kind of all laws work. They're, you know, they take on the risk when they break the law, right?
if they didn't know it was a law, then they're not
Well,
knowing they're breaking.
I mean, yeah,
That's not an excuse.
yeah, it's not an excuse. It's,
If you don't know, you don't know. You pay for it.
You do, yeah, but
I mean, also, when you go to an Airbnb, I mean, there's often times when they give you the welcome packet, they tell you what's allowed. I mean, that could be, something that the host or whatever take on that responsibility as a good host. They lay out the parameters of what the city, allows, and, hey, watch out for this, no parking.
hey, I don't have a parking lot, so you're on
Right.
your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I mean, to add to that discussion, I know every one of we have parking requirements and parking standards in our zoning ordinance that are referenced in every one of our districts. What if and I don't know how directly applicable it would be to this discussion in short-term rentals, but would referencing our parking requirements in the zoning ordinance be sufficient? Because we define what a parking is, in terms of not a lawn and what parking is.
Right.
And, I don't know, it references, going through the site plan process in terms of everything else. I don't know if it covers the number of parking spaces though, but
It's determined by use usually, isn't it? Like, they're specific to use, right? So, B2 could be different depending on the use. Like a
Okay.
gym might have more or less than a flower shop or something, right? So it's use specific from so I think it is important to just reference some type. I do agree there's standards for everything, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, to the extent that you're able to anticipate all the uses. I mean, you have contingencies if something's not listed. I guess, because we are talking about non-residential properties here. In council's discussion, were they good with it not being in residential districts? I'm asking everybody what they
I
thought.
think only the mayor made a comment that she appreciated the zoning
They didn't-
areas that we
They didn't get
identified.
too far with it because they read and then they never made a motion or pulled a vote on it. They just let it die.
Sure.
Very little discussion, actually.
Yeah.
I
overall.
just wondered if that was gonna be, if we sent it back without doing anything with that, if that was gonna be an issue.
Do I hear a joint meeting coming up?
We had one of those.
Sit down with them and find out what their problem is, or not ours, obviously.
I mean, so I appreciate that you don't want to do a parking standard.
Yeah.
I would be comfortable doing like a hotel parking standard kind of thing. I mean, but if I guess the one guest room might throw us off, like one for every bedroom, does that mean? Or like,
Yeah, and in a hotel, a guest room is the unit that you're
right.
staying
So-
in for the night.
I don't want to be overburdensome either, right? Like, one or two spots is probably enough. But, like you said, Joe, if they can take a large commercial property and split it up to fit a large group of people, that might not be enough. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, to build on the comment about the party, I mean, would that even be, they're not guests though, they're like, I mean, they're not even, those people aren't staying there.
Visitors, yeah.
They're just
Yeah.
like visitors, but, so like, you can't really consider them guests regardless, because they'd be out of compliance regardless, right away.
Right, and I'm not trying to account for parking for a
Yeah.
party, I promise.
So, yeah, so like,
Yeah.
I see it more of like, it's just not a reasonable restriction, like I think it's over restrictive to match parking spots to, especially when it's three occupants, or however it reads, what is it? Three
Yeah,
occupants
one for
per
every
one
three.
spot. I
Three,
mean,
yeah.
2 bedrooms could be 4 people with 1 spot. I don't know, I think it's really restrictive to put.
I can agree
put
to
terms on
that.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, do I want to get rid of like any parking requirements? No, I don't think that's
Oh, okay.
reasonable.
I
But,
thought that's where you were going. I'm like.
I mean, maybe, discuss it more with maybe one, or define, one, or I'm not sure exactly. I just don't want to put a lot of restriction on it
Mm-hmm.
that limits, the potential,
It's a very hard use to predict, because you could have 6 friends staying in a place together, and each of them drives their own car, and there's 6 cars, or you could have 8 people show up in one van, and
Right.
there's one vehicle. So it's a huge profile of different ways people use its properties.
Would it be safe to do it by per square foot?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the per square foot standard, like that, works for retail and things, but when you get into a situation like this where you have a defined occupancy here because of the way the residential codes work, and the fire department is gonna determine what the permitted maximum occupancy is.
And right now, the general ordinance does state that no dwelling unit uses a short-term rental may be built or modified to exceed a limitation of 10 persons. So we're not gonna have more than 10 people staying in one
That's the-
Okay.
registered short-term rental either way.
10.
It's a big van.
It's a big van. So the max, I think we would look to have parking as 2 max, right? Essentially, like,
Well, 3. It'd be
3?
3. Yeah.
well, according to our.
Actually,
ordinance.
it'd be 4, right? Because once they're past
No, 'cause
9.
if you have a half space or less, you discard that, so it'll be 3.
Okay, so 3 still, yeah.
But if you got
That's
10
essentially a
people,
full driveway.
If you're accommodating 10 people, you probably want 3 spaces.
Right.
Because you don't, I mean, I kind of feel like it's a reasonable
Reasonable is 3?
number.
Yeah.
Right, because it says the owner of the unit shall demonstrate that the site can accommodate 1 vehicle per 3 occupants, so that puts it at 3 parking spots
Yeah,
for every
if you get-
short-term
if you
rental.
get the full 10.
I think maybe we just needed to flesh it out a little bit more with us, so we can define it a little more clearly to
Sure.
city council. So I think Joe and I can do that. We can work on some language and present it back to you based on tonight's discussion.
Did we change the rental fee? I think we talked about that. It's $80 now. I think we talked about raising.
We haven't made any change at this point, no, but
Okay.
if it's something that the city council reviews the fee schedule during the budget cycle, so
Yeah.
it's something.
Ferndale's $250 a year.
Oh,
For
they
their-
have
their fee.
yearly interior inspections too? It's probably they'd probably have to charge at least that.
License is always necessary. Excuse me, occupancy is limited to 8 people. If you get 3 violations, you get revoked by the city manager. Application is $250 for a year. Inspections are done annually, looking at smoke detectors, driveway steps, furnace report, and safety. So, like I said, they've got 70, so they've been in this game.
That's what the 250 is covering.
Yeah,
Yeah,
their
they've been-
inspections more
Inspection,
intense.
yeah.
They've been in the game longer than we have, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they also have to go through more of a review process because they do have a density standard. So when they get an application, they have to go look to make sure there's not another short-term rental within a certain radius. And so they do a little bit more preliminary work before anything's approved.
Yeah,
So more
that's
staff
all we're
time's
trying to do is
allocated.
get on top of it here, that's all. That's-
All right, so I think we're all good to
Okay.
at least represent something to you and go from there.
Sounds like a
I just have
plan.
one question. I was just curious. I was thinking about this, just based on like other forums and different cities kind of addressing some of the potential concerns of Airbnbs and short-term rentals and things. Have we seen or have we discussed at all max like ownership of these short-term rentals in terms of how many you can own in the city?
I think that max would be 10. With the
So
cap.
that's basically how we're controlling for it is the
I don't think that like intentionally, but the way it's written, yes. And the fact that there's already 11 operating, and with our cap being 10, we're essentially enforcing it without having language to enforce it.
okay.
You're talking about an individual owner having multiple ones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think,
Oh.
some of the concern again is if you're following, some of these like get rich real estate, they talk about
Well,
owning
BlackRock
multiple
does it
short-term
too,
rentals,
yeah.
and you just don't want one company coming in and taking control of, a major portion of the market. So we can have hopefully local hosts that respect the area, kind of obviously take a little bit of pride in the work that they do within their Airbnb. So I was just curious if anyone's seen that or if it's something that we would address in any capacity. But if we have a max cap, I guess, and we're already hitting that limit, then there's really not potential to,
I mean, if,
Open the door.
unless they're in there for the long term. I mean, I'm not opposed to that, but, you know, really the commercialization of it all is why we're here, right? If it was just the, you know, the neighbor doing we wouldn't be here, but it's the corporate entity of it all.
Yeah, I really don't foresee that being an issue because we do
Yeah.
have a cap of 10, and we're already at
Okay.
that cap.
yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate it. I'm just kind of curious.
And currently, all 11 are in residential district right now. Are there any in the proposed district?
I'm trying to go off memory. I believe there's one in one of the districts that would be conforming. Yeah, I believe it's B2. One is in a different business district, and then the rest of them are in the R2 district.
And again,
And I'll
Are
have
we-
that report in the packet next
Yeah.
time. I think that might help as
Are
well.
we firm at 10, knowing that we already have 11, or potentially putting a cap on residential versus the other identified zones, districts? You know, like, I guess, that's more of a question for just the future state, right? Because at this point, we're allowing Airbnbs in different, zones that we potentially you couldn't apply for because they're already, all permits are accounted for in residential. So I don't know if we ever thought about opening a certain amount or capping it by district or something like that. I don't really know if it's something worth discussing.
I think I'm comfortable with the citywide. I mean, we're
Max.
2.2 square miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you got what you need then?
Yeah, I think we've got enough info to work on some amendments and bring it back to you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll ask Mr. Public back there if you have any comments you'd like to state.
Great discussion, thank you for having it.
Okay, well,
Support whatever you guys say.
thanks for showing up. All right, then we'll move on to agenda item number 9, which is zoning ordinance amendment discussion.
Thank you for the last discussion. I thought that was productive. We're, with the short agenda tonight, there's been a few items that have come up that Joe and I have discussed that we wanted to potentially look at amending the ordinance on. The first is the outdoor cafe standards, which were provided in the packet for you to review. The biggest issue that I've noticed in reviewing these applications every year is the time frame. And because Michigan's weather is so vast, we don't know what's going to happen. Last year, it was in the 50s and 60s until well into December. This year, not so much. But with the dates being April 15th to November 15th, it's restricted as to when businesses can open them and close them. And so I'm just looking to get some feedback on potentially not necessarily eliminating the time frame as a whole. It's important that we keep the public right-of-way in downtown open for the safe removal of snow during the winter, but just to allow some flexibility to allow them to open up if it's a warmer year from the start or if it's staying warmer throughout the year. And there's not necessarily language presented to you tonight, but I just wanted to get some feedback to see if it's something that you'd be interested in reviewing.
Change the word to weather permitting.
Essentially, but still having the rough guideline,
Right.
that way they're aware that it's gonna be around April 15th and around November 15th is
Right.
when they're able to operate.
So is that language today for both patio and rooftop? Because I know you kind of talked about them separately in this, and then I was confused that the language was,
And that's part of the issue too, is like the language kind of contradicts itself,
Yeah.
and the ordinance isn't clear to begin with, because it does reference rooftops, which we don't have any currently.
that was my second question.
Correct.
We don't have
Yeah,
To confirm.
right.
Hideout applied
So
for
it's
one.
just-
They were going to do one several years ago, and that fell through for some reason.
Yeah.
So is this primarily the areas that, you know, for restaurants and cafes that provide like a fence around?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, these
So-
are real quick, these are only in the downtown, so
Okay.
right in the city center.
Okay. And is there ordinance that only allowed to serve food if it is fenced off?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. So like having, allowing them to, keep their tables and chairs out, weather permitting, but, not having the fence, that would not fly because of the ordinance that.
Right.
Right.
It needs to be restricted to a
Right.
certain area.
So my only point of concern was I thought restaurants got pretty creative, especially during COVID, to use igloos or other warmed areas for people who wanted to space out or be outside still. And so today they couldn't do that, because I remember Pumachug at least did that for a period of time.
During COVID, we were much more lax to try and make sure they could sustain a level of business. But as we've moved forward, we're trying to go back into how things were operating before that, and just to maintain clear right of way during the winter.
So
Strictly for snow removal.
Primarily, yes.
Okay.
this is only applying to right-of-way? Or I think of 54 West, where it has a lot of outdoor,
Yeah,
or is
that's
that
on their
considered
private
different?
property. So,
Okay.
for example, Grand River, they had their outdoor patio, they
Mm-hmm.
had their application, everything good, and then they removed it per the ordinance, and so they're using the city's right of way to sell their merchandise out there.
In the Wolf, White Wolf, is it White Wolf? They are gonna have something more permanent there outside, aren't they?
But they would still take
Correct.
take it down.
I guess.
They have to take it down, though? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is my only concern. I utilize that in the winter too, because every day I walk my dog, and if I get a coffee, I sometimes sit out there. So I hate to completely take it away, more so to give flexibility to restaurants and cafes. So I personally, I don't even know that I would want any restriction. But if you feel like the city has a true issue with, plowing snow, I'd be curious to hear more about that. Because it is kind of the responsibility then of the gated patio to clear their own space. But I don't know how you'd enforce that. So I'm kind of curious, I guess, the concern for this and the need. You can just explain that a bit further, just so I fully understand.
So the city's responsible for maintaining the right of way, so all the brick pavers out front in all the businesses.
Yeah.
And during the winter, if every single spot had an outdoor patio, it would be very restrictive for our public works to remove the snow efficiently, safely. And if we get 10 inches of snow and they're plowing and they knock down a fence accidentally, they're trying to take care of the entire city. We want to just try to mitigate that liability.
Is the alleyway closed down at that time, too?
That's gotta maintain emergency.
I believe that it'll all be removed, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I'm kind of, and maybe the solution is more benches or something down there, because I do feel like, especially with the social district, that doesn't end year-round, right? That's not from only, so like with the social district, I feel like people utilize those things more. Maybe they'll finish a drink before they go in the next one, I don't know. Would your recommendation to be like, follow the leaf pickup? Because sometimes they change that in flexibility depending on snow. So then we can have, Facebook talking about leaf pickup and chairs in city center. I don't know. What's your thought to kind of,
So every year we have 8 roughly, and so it would just be an active line of communication with them to let them know when they're expecting to have that removed, or when they're allowed to put them back up.
so it'd be admin's decision? And then, like, okay, so let's say all of a sudden we are getting, 10 inches of snow on Friday. Do you give them some type of heads up on like, you've got this much time?
Yeah, we
or-
would be monitoring the weather and just making sure of what's to come.
Okay.
So for example, last year, and this is where it really came up, is it was a really warm spring early on. There were a handful of restaurants that wanted to get their patio up and running in late March. And, I had to say no, because they're not allowed to operate before April 15th. And knowing that there wasn't going to be any more snow coming, we could have had the flexibility to say, yes, go ahead, do it, you're in compliance. But because the ordinance is very restrictive, there's no flexibility to allow them to do that. And that's all I'm really looking for, is to have the ordinance allow a level of flexibility to give them some more options to have their outdoor patio up.
Yeah, not quite so tight as it is, yeah.
I agree. I mean, so just to start, yeah, I think that it's important that we do something here. I would like to see flexibility from administration to change the dates as needed, depending on, weather, especially, seasonality, if it changes at all. I would also like to have businesses be able to appeal or make a case if they would like for year-round, because I would hate to just exclude the possibility of them doing something very unique in a confined, if it's in a space. Like, I do think the igloos and those things bring more uniqueness to a restaurant. And we don't want to completely ruin the right-of-way. Either way, I think it's maintained within this ordinance that there has to be, what was it, at least 5 feet or so,
Yeah,
right?
for ADA compliance, yeah.
But I hate to have the restrictions on, so I guess for me personally, no restriction would be ideal. But secondly, I do agree that I want the flexibility of administration to change the dates as needed. And then third, I would like to see some type of appeal process, at least to apply for a year-round, if that's possible. And that's
Well, and with
just
your
one opinion of one
year-round, would
member.
they be agreeing to maintain any type of snow and ice and?
Yeah, I think that's
They
part
would
of
have
the
to.
application process, to say, hey, I want to maintain this year-round, but I'm going to have either some type of permanent structure or,
Well, and that might,
That
for the
might-
city though, open up.
Yeah, that might incline them to start building things on city property.
Right, like, would that be an easement kind of thing? Like, well, I've had my patio there for 10 years now, so it's technically mine.
There may be a restaurant downtown that has a similar circumstance. And so I think what we want to avoid is permanent structures there,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
to let them put them up sooner, because they do fix them to the ground in some fashion, but it allows them to remove it as well.
That would be my only
yeah, and I
hesitation on
agree,
the
maybe
year-round.
permanent was a bad example, but
Yeah.
if you're going to get creative with an igloo, and, we have portions of downtown that there's a bigger right-of-way. That was all. I was trying to leave
Yeah.
some flexibility for an application for that unique scenario. But yes, either way, I think we're on the right track of
Okay.
having more flexibility on the dates.
I think to start, I know you have proposed recommended language halfway on the second page of your letter. I know there's been a lot of discussion for maybe special circumstances, but I think it does offer that flexibility for yourself or for the city to make that determination as the need arises. So I do like that.
All right, so I think we can go back, develop some language, provide some more information on potential year-round use, and we'll come back to the commission and get some feedback on that.
Thanks
So,
for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Seems important.
Yeah. I'm just gonna grab a sip of water real quick.
Okay, we're done with the ordinance amendment discussion at this point then, right?
There's a second point.
Yeah, so there were two ordinance discussions I wanted to have.
Okay.
The second one, not necessarily similar to the first discussion, but my feeling is that they do have an underlying similarity. So this is regarding site plan review and approval, specifically referencing minor facade changes and major facade changes. And so I can run through all the minor facade changes right now, which do not fall under site plan approval. And those are cleaning and painting / repairing, repair of existing exterior building material with similar materials only, replacement or repairs of existing doors and windows, replacement or repairs to existing awnings, replacement of light fixtures, restoration of original building architectural features as supported by historical data, replacement of existing signage, installation of new signage, removal of non-conforming signage, addition of landscape elements such as planter boxes, etc., addition of outdoor patio, cafe areas, and then installation of streetscape improvements such as benches, art pieces. And then we have the major facade changes, which are included but not limited to the following, shall be subject to full site plan review and approval by the Planning Commission. And those are installation of new window and door openings where not previously existing, remodeling of upper story facades, if not approved by planning commission, installation of new awnings or other window/doorway details not previously existing, change of exterior buildings, building materials, and then other changes not noted above that would alter the appearance of the entire building. And so I am presenting this to the commission tonight, referencing two properties that have gone through site plan approval this year, and then another one that I just have recently had an inquiry on. So at 701 South Main Street, there was a site plan review done for the relocation of a window from one side of the door to the other without the footprint of the building changing, the transparency element of the window changing, the window size of the overall building did not necessarily change. And then over on 639 North Rochester, recently there was that new awning entranceway site plan that went in front of you. And so with the language we have right now, both of those obviously required site plan approval. And Joe and I have a feeling that those type of items, installation of new window and doors, and then the new awnings, window doorways, don't necessarily change the building, the size, the intensity, anything like that. And require them to go and get full site plan approval to go through that entire process, to have the same application fee as a residential or large-scale commercial development, really hinders those business owners. I don't know the exact number, but I'd say a really strong majority of businesses in Clawson are small or locally owned. And to go and get site plan approval, our fees are just under $1,300, and then that doesn't even cover their architectural fees or any consultants they have. And so you're probably looking at $5,000 to $10,000 for that business owner to go through site plan approval just to have a window relocated or something like that. And I'm just looking to get some feedback and see if it's something worth amending to allow it to go under some type of administrative approval via a building permit, or to establish something that is not a full site plan review, but it would still come in front of the planning commission. So to scale it back a little bit. And so I imagine this may warrant some conversation back and forth, because it would be not a major change, but certainly not a minor change, as I sort of referenced the ordinance there.
I recall the guy on Rochester Road with the awning. I don't know if his awning was changed before he came here or not. But the one on Main Street, they came in for a site plan approval after the work was already done. The window was already moved, the door was already moved. Then he came after the fact for a site plan. So I think somebody dropped the ball there someplace on that one. I don't know, it's up to our vote here, how we feel about this, but I still feel bad that we lost the power of temporary certificate of occupancy years ago. That was never going to go away from me. And we used to have that power. Only the planning commission had that power, and it was taken away to administration now. And I missed that. We were told we couldn't do it. And now I'm seeing you're wanting us to give up more to administration. Now, I'm not saying you guys can't do it, but it's up to the members here. Do you want to give up that power? Do you want?
Well, one of the important parts of that is that we check for compliance on other things, like the awning. I know we didn't enforce it, but there was some sidewalk issues going on. Mm-hmm. There can be building other, in my other part of that would be like when was the building last occupied? I think those are important components of site plan review as well. Like if it's been vacant for many years, and I think they should just, and I guess that would be triggered in a different way, right, Nick? So I'm answering that. But yeah, there's certain components of it that I feel like are important for us to oversee.
What would happen if we would start seeing changes around town, not knowing anything about it, and then, oh yeah, that was okay, this is okay to do, that's okay to do, but we're not aware of them going on.
Well, in one hand, I mean, when you apply for a permit, through the permit review, they should catch any items that are non-compliant to the building ordinance.
Well, wait, code is different though.
No, I mean, the city still, I mean, the building official should still have an understanding of what the city ordinance is. I mean, anytime you go in front of a building or apply for a building permit, all items are looked at. you know, for a residential permit, I mean, zoning ordinances still applied.
Fair
So-
enough, right? The setbacks and stuff. would be-
Setbacks, all building ordinances should be reviewed during a permit
Well, I can tell you they're
application.
not.
Well, they should be, though. I mean, that's, you know, that is one of the
I can confirm
responsibilities.
that they are. Do you have an example of when it's not?
I mean, even when site plans come in front of us, they're not, they don't address certain aspects of nonconformity in terms of materials out, you know, on buildings. I remember that, I don't remember Michelin building, like they had ephes all the way to the ground. I mean, there's been multiple, you know, even as soon as the awning, like there's sidewalks are broken and cracked, and he says the customers don't use it, so we weren't as concerned, and he's gonna address that this year. But like certain aspects of that site can be not up to a standard that we would require, and can be health, safety, directly related issues.
I think if it's a major alteration, I think the planning commission should review. But if it's just a repair, a minor repair, such as replacing windows and doors, updating some of the items that you mentioned, just simple updates to the existing, I think that should be covered by the
Well,
building official.
so is there a difference to you between moving windows and expanding or retracting windows and changing sizes
Yeah,
versus
so I think
update?
moving the window definitely should go in front of planning, because that is something that, I mean, it should, you know, we should have a chance to review. I mean, that I would consider that a major alteration or a significant alteration. But updating or repairing, to a certain extent, to the original condition, I think that's a minor.
Yeah, so
minor
that is
item.
defined as a minor.
Minor
And so
item.
the installation of a new window is a major facade and does trigger site plan. So I think
Right.
that's
Yeah.
the direction of what you're going. And I just want to mention something is, you spoke about power, and that is nowhere near the rationale why we're presenting this. It's when we have a business owner come in, they're like, we just want to have a new door at this entrance. For example, the Jets Pizza Hut Plaza right there on 14 Mile.
Yep.
Their farthest west unit is the largest space there. It's been vacant for a year, if not more.
Mr. Band, yes.
And-
He rents it out every other year, it seems to be vacant.
Right, and he's really struggled to maintain tenants and get tenants. And so their architect reached out, wanted to put a new door in there and then create 2 units instead of 1. But because he's added a new door, that triggers a site plan review. And it just seems a little overbearing for something like that to an existing structure that's not going to change the dynamic of the site to have them go and get a site plan
He's gonna be
review.
charged, what, $1,500 to come in here and get
I mean,
our,
that's just the city fees, yeah.
just to get our approval?
In time, I mean.
Well, yeah, and I feel, I mean, even when,
I think, yeah. Oh, sorry. go
sorry, the collision shop was here and they wanted permission to put a roof on. I'm like, yes, put a roof, right? But they had to go through that whole process too. When people are, I don't want to inhibit people from making improvements to their building, and I don't want to make it cost prohibited to them, right? Like, but there has to be a balance, right? Maybe, why is the door being relocated? Wouldn't
There'd be an
they just-
addition of a new door, because
Addition of a
there's
new
one
door.
unit currently, there'd be
Just gonna cut it
2.
in
And so they
Okay.
need another door. So I think just based on this discussion, you would entertain, we'll have to come up with language, but for, not a full-scale site plan review, but something that has those not minor improvements, but not the complete site plan review
Give them a
necessary.
mini site plan, and we'll only charge
Right.
them half.
In the memo, I did put set standards for a minor site plan review. And so that would take some additional language. We'd have to work through some modifications of the fee schedule. And Giffords and Joe already said that they'd entertain working with us and having some separate standards for that.
Yeah, I think I mean, from what I'm hearing is like, we do agree, we don't want to burden people with minor changes. I agree with the maybe lower fees,
Okay.
right, for minor changes and separating that, but
Yeah.
I don't think the burden is coming in front of this commission, hopefully.
Right.
I think it's more the maybe the process, but mostly the fees. So if there's a way to separate it out,
Right, so that they might not need full architectural plans for a door or something. But even the Jets thing, well, do we need to look at parking then there? Because they're gonna have two separate, I mean, I don't know, and I don't expect you to know, but it could open up the possibility of multiple uses and us taking a once-over on our parking standard. I'm not trying to say that that's gonna happen there, but that's an example of like why we might wanna see something like that, but do I think they need to have an architect draw and submit a full-on,
Show a
like
picture
you
of a
said?
door,
Yeah,
Yeah, he's gonna be taking the same area, cutting it in half, so it's gonna be two different businesses, but at this point, I'm sure he doesn't even know what business is gonna rent from him, what the volume
Right.
of traffic's gonna be.
yeah.
Right, like the square footage of the space isn't changing, so I can't see
Yeah.
the parking requirement
Right,
changing
okay,
substantially.
for sure.
And I know that they've got a handful of parking spots up front, and they do have parking in the rear as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I know where you use that as an example, but
Mm-hmm.
just,
That's why multi-tenant shopping centers have a different parking standard than standalone retail.
Well, and that's important for us, I guess, in the context of this discussion, right? Because then we might not need as much oversight on certain aspects of certain site plan,
right.
right?
I think we need to define what actually qualifies for a full site plan review or a full
Yeah.
review. You know, like maybe do different tiers, whether it's a, you know, okay, just a revamping of something or fixing or to its original, you know, form. Okay, great. That's a permit. You know, that'll be taken care of in the plan review. Or if it's something minor, like adding a door to a shopping structure, maybe that's a truncate or a quicker, you know, streamlined version of a planning review,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And then if it's a full-on renovation, alteration of a property, that would trigger a.
Okay.
right?
Well, because there could be an opportunity for parking lots or drainage or something that's been going on at that property for 30 years that needs to be addressed, that we've heard about. So I just want to make sure that those different levels wouldn't take away in an enforcement, whether it be from admin or us, to bring certain things up to a standard, right?
Yeah, and again, there's a reason there wasn't actual language presented to you. It was just to give 1,000-foot view of what the standards are and if there is an appetite to potentially look at changing it. I think there is. And so we can come up with some language, bring it back to you and continue fleshing it out. It's not something that needs to be changed tomorrow or by the end of the year by any means. But if it's something that we think we want to take a look at, we can work on some language and how that works. And it might be one of those things that we keep on coming back to and doesn't change in 2 or 3 meetings, but because we want to get it right if we're going to go through this process.
So Nick, sorry, so you guys would have that enforcement mechanism as admin without it coming to us to bring things to a certain standard or address certain nonconformities in a property?
Yeah.
If they needed to be addressed, right? If something, the parking lot's crumbling and they just want to do something else, you would enforce that? Okay,
Yeah.
that's all I want to know. Thank,
But who enforces site plans in the long run?
Building planning department.
When was Biscuits and Gravy in there last time and they got a site plan approval to pave the rest of their parking lot? Seems like it's been quite a while.
Yeah.
I think they may have opted against ultimately doing the project.
Oh, they did? Okay. Has
maybe
their-
they need a bigger
Has their
spot.
site plan expired? Has it been over a year?
Well, they had their site plan approved, their initial one, and then they came back to get site plan approval for that expansion of their parking lot. They submitted some engineering plans, and then after feedback was given, we haven't got anything new.
Okay, now, in the original site plan approval for that building, we, as an item on there, screening of the rooftop units, and this has still been bugging the hell out of me because they didn't do it, now they done it, and then what's up there is aluminum siding that I could have picked up on the side of the road someplace. I mean, it looks that bad. And when I mentioned it to you, you said, oh, we're gonna wait till they do their parking lot, then we'll get them to fix that. What's the holdup? That to me is, this is heart of downtown. People are walking by here all the time, and to me, it looks like trash up on the roof.
So do you guys, what would you do in that scenario if you wanted to enforce that? Is there a civil code of
You
like,
would send an ordinance violation
Yeah.
for
We've
lack of
we've done in the
compliance.
past, way down, way down the street, I think Hikmed Mahmood owns part of the property there. That's where the laundromat is downtown, across from Michael's Party Store. And they put a rooftop screening unit on, which is the white lattice work you can buy at Home Depot.
jeez.
They cut it to size and they put it on with zip ties. And it lasted a few months, then it got cold, warm, the zip ties broke off, and he came in there and says, it fell off, we're gonna replace it. And I said, no, you're not gonna replace it. So he had to come in with drawings of what he's gonna put up there. It had to be steel, nuts and bolts, it had to be put on as a permanent thing. And I think when we asked for rooftop screening, it wasn't on their original site plan. They said, okay, we're gonna do it, but they didn't show us what they were gonna do. And I think somehow we have to get control over that, otherwise people are just gonna put,
So you would like to
Mhm.
define standards for the screening, which I think
I
that
think
maybe
there
that's
should,
something
there should be,
worth exploring.
when they put a light bulb outside, we request that it conform to the lighting properly. I think if they screen something, it should be a permanent type of screening. It can't be cardboard or plastic or bent up aluminum as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I think they look better. If they just took the aluminum off now, I'd be happier. It looks like two bicycle racks up there. Without-
It is pretty rough.
Without-
I will say, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just.
They have good potatoes. I don't know. I'm not saying anything.
I'm just ashamed of it. I mean, I know the two guys, they did a lot of work on the building themselves.
And they have
That
fresh
is- it's
fruit
like-
all the time.
It's like way
I don't
undersized
look,
too.
it is. I mean, they
It's
could
way
use a bigger lot.
undersized. It's kinda funny.
They're doing great
Yeah.
in terms of food.
No, I'm
Their
saying
food
the
is wonderful.
rooftop screening is way
Oh.
undersized. It's like-
But I would think that maybe we could plan something in our future to address standards for that, and I think that that's,
Well, we try to do that. On a site plan, if somebody comes in with a site plan and we say, okay, we're going to approve your site plan for you with this, this, and this. We give them 3 things to do. We want you to put a bicycle rack in, screen your rooftop units, and mow your grass or something like that. Once they go out that door,
maybe
that's
they,
it. That's
they
it.
misunderstood the bike rack for the
That's it.
rooftop screening.
They can stop mowing their grass, they can not screen anything off, and apparently they can get away. They never come back to us. We never see them again.
So
we
I don't
know.
think we have standards so when we're looking at a site plan to say nuts and bolts to a roof with certain materials, which is something I think we can ask. Right, Nick? We don't have a certain standard for what is a rooftop screening look like?
If it was put in the original site plan, we can, like a photometric.
Right,
No, but
but
we
our
have to
standards
require
are
it.
very broad when it comes to rooftop screening. There's, yeah, there's 4 points in there, and I can just read them if you want me to.
Sure.
In all zoning districts, roof appliances such as but not limited to cooling towers, air conditioners, heating apparatus, dust collectors, filters, transformers, and any other such appliance or apparatus other than flagpoles, chimneys, for carrying products of combustion and radio antenna towers shall be enclosed with opaque screens not less in height than the height of the highest appliance as measured from the plane of the roof surface upon which the screen device is mounted to the top of the highest appliance. In instances where roof vents, roof-mounted mechanical equipment, pipes, etc., can be viewed from above or below, they shall be grouped together, painted to match roof color to reduce their appearance, screened from view, and integrated into the building architecture to the extent feasible. Where a parapet wall is present and accomplishes the same screening effect required above, the parapet wall may be accepted by the planning commission as a substitute for the rooftop screening device. The design of the screening device shall be compatible with the architectural design of the building upon which it is located.
They're in standard then, aren't they?
I mean,
Would you
Technically.
not say that that's a violation?
No.
I think it is, actually. I think there's enough in that ordinance to present adequate screening. It's just an enforcement issue.
I don't know. It matches their exterior. It's
no,
aluminum.
It's
No,
short.
not
It's
quite.
short. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
way too undersized. It
See the
covers
unit
only
behind them.
maybe, 60, 70% of it, and it's clearly defined as a
So you would
rooftop
have,
unit.
have no problem if they just added more aluminum up there? I think the issue is the asphyxiation
They can
to
do it in
that.
aluminum, they can do it in concrete as far as I'm concerned, as long as it's done so you don't see the units do it.
so we are deviating a little bit from the agenda.
Keep it going.
I think we know that we would like to have some maybe more clear standards on the enclosure of roof appliances.
If they
We can
come in,
come
and
back on
they have
this.
a photometric, they're putting light bulbs on the outside of their building. We want to see it in the prints, so to make sure that they're not lighting up their neighbors' backyards and things. And it's the same thing with this. If it's in the print, if they're gonna screen off the top, rooftop, I'd like to see it in the original site plan, what material they're gonna use and what it's gonna look like. In this case, they said, okay, yeah, we'll do it. We'll screen it off, and this is what we end up with. And to me, this is not a satisfactory method of screening off a rooftop. My opinion. Tag, you're it.
All right.
I'm not gonna say it.
That's all I have on the ordinance.
That's it for
Yeah.
ordinance amendment discussion? Okay, thank you. How about planners report?
Nothing for that, but I'm going to give a little legal report, a legal update.
Are you qualified for that, Joe?
No, but it's a pretty broad summary. So if you want to move on to the legal update, I can do that one.
Okay, we'll scratch planners report and we'll put a legal update up here. Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to give a little update on the cannabis ballot initiative. So they were trying to amend the charter of the city to permit cannabis uses. And an appeals court elsewhere in Michigan had already found that that was not a valid way to permit cannabis uses. You have to make an ordinance rather than amend the charter, is what this appeals court found. So our attorney was in court last week and did obtain an injunction against the ballot initiative, so it cannot go into effect because it is enjoined right now. And the injunction is pending a decision at the Michigan Supreme Court, which is looking at the original case that the appeals court made the decision on. So when the Supreme Court makes its decision, we'll know definitively one way or another whether or not the charter amendment is a valid way to permit cannabis uses, or if it has to be an ordinance as the appeals court found. So it's going to take a little while. I don't know exactly what the schedule is going to be, but our attorney is watching it and will come to us with whatever needs to happen.
Rennes implied we didn't have to rush in to figure out where we're going to put these things right away.
Exactly, yeah. It's going to be a
Time on it.
while before the Supreme Court makes its decision, upon which we will have to either keep doing what we're doing or make some sort of accommodation.
Is this a Clausen-specific thing, or is it a statewide?
This is a statewide thing, yeah. The appeals court decision that said you can't permit these via a charter amendment applies statewide right now, essentially, while we're waiting for the Supreme Court to make a decision.
Yeah, so from what I read, like, there's something in the marijuana licensing or legal component of the marijuana law, because I was
Right.
confused. I'm like, wait, but we just changed our charter.
Right.
But there's something in the actual marijuana law that says you can't do charter, right?
Exactly,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
explicit to that,
Yeah.
that particular thing.
Right.
And it sounds like it was Farmington Hills, right, that,
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
okay. So we don't want to talk about zoning at all for that? Like, this isn't our time to,
Well, that's not
like,
to say that we can't talk about zoning or changing the city policy with regard to these uses, but we don't have to in order to respond to a charter amendment.
and do you know if that were to go into effect, would we have a 30-day, 90-day period to?
You would have some sort of period in which to get something in place, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's that.
Thank you. Do we have a staff report and training opportunities?
The staff report was included in the planning commission packet. The one major notice is that 502 South Main Street had a temporary certificate of occupancy issued, and they are working on addressing those items that they need to have to get final certificate of occupancy.
502?
The old CNC bump shop.
Oh,
And if you haven't been there yet, I would really recommend going and checking out the interior.
looks great outside.
It looks
dude.
beautiful,
The
yeah.
outside looks fantastic, but I think they did an even better job on the inside because they did maintain some of that historical architecture inside with the old brick. And so I think it's really a great fit for there. And over the next few months, they're going to be working on having a little cafe market in the front portion. And so they'll really liven up that area of South Main Street.
That's exciting.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll let you bring a couple of oil cans down to them so they can decorate the interior. There used to be a gas station.
You could serve coffee from them or.
Buy your oil in like a glass jar, like a mason jar with a screw-on funnel lid to it back in the day. Because they pumped it bulk into smaller containers for you before cans. Okay, that's, anything else on staff? Or
Unless there's any questions.
we're all good?
Are you guys doing like a grand opening thing there at any time, or Chamber of Commerce doing something like that?
We'll do something. At this point, it's probably not going to be until January, just with the holidays coming up. But yeah, we're expecting to do something.
Cool.
Question for you, Nick. You signed us up for the Michigan State course. Is there an expiration?
No, but if you have issues logging in, just shoot me an email and I can make sure you get access to that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
there wasn't a timeline that we had to hit.
Wait, which course is
The
that?
Citizen Planner.
The one
Oh.
we all should have completed already, but I'm just catching up on work now, and I'm hoping to finish.
I can
I think
send
it
back
did
in
make
March
me
when we
restart
just-
some of my videos, though. I swear I was further
They're
along.
tedious at times.
Yeah.
I can send a reminder to everyone too, if that would be easier. Just,
Just want to make sure
Yeah.
that when you signed us up, there wasn't a complete by this date, otherwise.
no,
you have to-
that is tied to
Yeah.
Josh Solomon.
Okay.
It's all
Just
yours.
making sure.
Yep.
I know you're watching.
Oh, man.
Okay, does anybody have any other comments they'd like to make for the last meeting of the year here? Aside from Merry Christmas. We won't meet until January. If nothing further.
Well, Joe, at our first January meeting, will we do all those things then, or do you think it would be the second one? Okay. Yeah,
I believe we do election of officers in the first meeting in January.
is it?
Usually,
It's usually scheduled for that.
What I was referring to is more like the year review, and then there was something else. Oh, yeah, we're gonna look over
I
our,
guess it would be the goal setting and annual report. If we have the annual report ready, we'll just do it all first meeting.
at the first meeting, okay. Oh, and I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Support?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer,
Yes.
Mr. Cusera,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai,
Yes.
and Ms. Redmond.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas, Joe and Nick, or happy holidays, or Kwanzaa, or Hanukkah,
You too.
whatever you celebrate.
Yeah, see you in the new year.
All right.